the human species has been knitting itself together, claiming technologies which allow the manipulation of energy, letting its population run uncontrolled to force an ever-expanding cultural and technological frontier. The presence of ourselves on this planet is the major evidence that a transcendental process of some sort is underway here. If this were a planet of chipmunks, glaciers, butterflies, and caribou herds, Darwinian evolution with a few twiddles would be perfectly adequate to explain what is going on here. But an acceleration of process in a limited domain of biology, beginning about 1 million years ago, indicates to me that we are now entering the short epochs, meaning these periods in which the evolution of novelty occurs so rapidly that transitions from one domain to another actually can be noted within the lifetime of single human beings. It's an enormous act of intellectual acrobatics to deny that we appear to be sailing toward catastrophe at 1,000 miles an hour with nobody able to figure out where the break is. I believe governments, scientific industrial democracies, are simply now managing the terror of apocalypse because they have no clue as to how to halt, direct, manage, or control the processes that they have set in motion. Population growth, extraction of minerals, toxification of the environment, the raising of middle-class expectations in the hearts of billions of impoverished people in the third world. The institutions which created this situation have no notion as to how to direct and control it. This is why we're not getting any kind of leadership from the top, why everything is managed toward a steady state. Meanwhile, technology, which is the downloading of human ideas into the domain of matter, is proceeding unabated around the clock. I mean, we have hardware for which we have not yet written software because we have no idea how to take advantage of the machines that have already been put in place. There is no one planning the evolution of our integration into our technology. You are free to write any kind of software you like. No one can foresee then the consequences of all of this technological development, software, wetware, hardware being stirred together. The planet has shrunk to a single informational point. The passing of every day, every week, brings us closer and closer to a kind of informational tangentiality with each other. Well, I believe, following the dictum that nothing is unannounced, that we can, from what is happening to us now, extrapolate toward this adventure in transformational novelty that is now looming ahead of us with such presence that it casts an enormous shadow over the three-dimensional landscape of historical becoming. And we as moderns are very conflicted about this because the only vocabulary we have to deal with something like this is the vocabulary of discredited religion. Before the rise of science, before the rise of technology, when religions presided over a much more slow-moving and easily managed world, great thinkers of all persuasions, through meditation and divine inspiration, whatever, saw that man's journey was a journey from the demonic to the divine, and that history was somehow the stage of human redemption. That view died with the rise of secular capitalism and industrial democracy. And yet, here in this, at the height of the trajectory of the enterprise of science and materialism, news comes from the rainforests, from the Aboriginal peoples of the world, that there are technologies of a different sort that have been in place since at least the last ice age. These are neurotechnologies, quasi-symbiotic relationships with plants, pharmacological approaches to manipulating human memory, aspiration, aesthetic concerns, so forth and so on. These psychedelic intimations have been presented to us as the naive suppositions of primitives, the landscape of the Jungian unconscious, chaotic events happening in the human brain-mind system, so forth and so on. These are all reductionist explanations. I believe that what these psychedelic states are actually ascents to a higher order of information. And by ascents, I mean the word in the dimensional context, as a mathematical idea, that here we are deployed in a three-dimensional matrix. The past fades into unknowability. The future fades into unknowability. And only the crudest and least interesting of processes, like the rising of the sun and the tides, can be propagated into the future with confidence. What shamans see, in contrast to this, is a hyperdimensional universe of information. They see the past, the origins, and they see the goal, the culmination, the place where the Ouroboros snake takes its tail in its mouth. We who are locked in linear history don't have this perspective. And what we have in its stead is immense anxiety about the future. We map the unknowable future onto the presumed experience of our own death, and vice versa, and we build up a universe that is characterized by existential abysses, the unknown future, the inevitability of death, and the impossibility of intellectually assimilating what that means. Shamanism isn't like this. Shamanism is a fractal point of view. What fractals are structures that have their subsets embedded in them. So the course of the history of an entire people can be known by looking at the history of an individual or a family. All subsets refer to levels above and below them. This is entirely different from the kind of linear history that we get in a hierarchical scientific society. It is more characteristic of experience. And this is a very important point, because the two phenomena that I tried to call your attention to that argue for hope are the self-evident accumulation of novelty and the self-evident acceleration of that accumulation of novelty. Well, now notice the phrase self-evident. These are not things that you have to study advanced mathematics to perceive. These are not things revealed to the holders of advanced degrees. This is stuff that one can tell by feeling into the world. The structure of linear society has disempowered the individual. We are all now, we have bought the Hobbesian notion that we are social atoms in a vaster machine than ourselves with a greater purpose than we can know. This is actually hogwash. As you move away from the human individual, the consciousness about what is happening becomes more and more low-grade and amoeba-like. You have the consciousness of the Giuliani administration, the consciousness of the American government. You see, as you widen the Venn, it becomes more and more primitive, more and more simply a matter of stimulus and response. But you, the supposed irrelevant atom at the center of this process, make very subtle judgments, take in information of all sorts, compare, contrast, weigh, understand, seek evidence. This is the subtlest thinking that's going on. But we don't reclaim our own minds. We look for institutional guidance, and yet it was institutions that guided us to this moment. So the character then of this next advance into novelty is, from my point of view, now easily discerned. It is boundary dissolution. This is what is happening. This is why great wealth and great poverty must come to terms with each other. It's why the first world and the third world must come to terms with each other. It's why gays and straights must come to terms with each other. Boundary dissolution is what is happening. And this has been going on for a long time, but it affected our peripheral technologies first, almost without us noticing it. We've gone from a world where information moved at the speed of a horse's gallop to a world where all information is cotangent. Space is only an illusion of the plebes. Everyone else, with their computer networks and their connections, knows that the world has become a kind of virtual point. And yet still we maintain the most toxic of all the fictions to come out of the dominator experience, the fiction of the individual ego. This maintenance of the fiction of ego is what is exacerbating a smooth transition into a new world order, because people have one foot in the dematerialized, collectivist, virtual, feeling-toned, experience-based future, but they also have one foot in the in the consumer fetish, objectified, constipated, linear, acquisitive, class-conscious, sex-conscious, race-conscious past. And each one of us is a union of these opposites. Each one of us is trying to make some kind of a alloy of our hideously dysfunctional cultural past and the incredibly compelling yet frightening, dimensionless, boundaryless, polymorphic, polyamorous future. And to my mind, then, the role that psychedelics play in all this is critical, because they are catalysts for change. If you are not moving as fast as the general wave of novelty, psychedelics will bring you up to speed. Society will go from being utterly incomprehensible and horrifying to simply being horrifying. If you are up to speed, and you with the cultural wave, and you then avail yourself of psychedelics, you become a force for spreading calm, spreading understanding. Because make no mistake about it, as we close distance with the transcendental object at the end of time, there is going to be a lot of vibration accumulate on the superstructures of the social airfoil. If the airfoil cannot be redesigned in flight as we approach this barrier, we will be ripped to pieces. This is, H.G. Wells said in 1905, history is a race between education and catastrophe. And it is going to be a photo finish. If we end up a smear through the shale and nature concludes that intelligence is something never again to put into the hopper, then it will be an enormous tragedy because we didn't go down without a struggle. We have the technologies, the ideology, the compassion for each other and caring world. We are not a lost cause yet, but we may end up a lost cause. And people then say, well, what should be done? The Tolstoyan question. What then should be done? Well, I came up through the whole Berkeley thing in the 60s and all that, and I'm very wary of hortatory political prescriptions for what should be done. I mean, we saw that the best impulses in Marxism turn into the most horrifyingly regimented and totalitarian societies. Goodwill is not enough. So what is to be done? I think the answer to this is not only nothing, but considerably less than nothing. And what I mean by that is that the real solutions to our problems lie in a series of negatives. Do not believe. Ideology has poisoned this planet. Ideology is bankrupt. It's a skin game. It's a shell game. It's only for marks and marks. It is beneath your dignity as a body to get mixed up in ideology. I mean, after all, where is it writ large that talking monkeys should understand the nature of being anyway? So belief is an incredible cop-out on intellectual truth-seeking, because belief precludes believing in its opposite. And so this is a self-limitation. You've become your own cop. And the ideologies of the 20th century are so shoddy and hobbled together or toxic to human values, they're not worth believing in anyway. So deconditioning ourselves from belief. Some people call it cynicism. I call it good sense. I'm not a cynical person, but I know shit from Shinola, and I don't expect people who don't to get a lot of respect from the rest of us. I mean, what does it mean if you're an optimist, and that means you can't proclaim the difference between boot polish and excreta? It's ridiculous. Okay, don't believe. The next thing which comes out of that, and is an even stronger prohibition, don't follow. Following is a tasteless position to find yourself in. Pets follow, vice presidents follow, and bad acts follow. So, why follow? All of these gurus, geishas, roshis, and rishis are simply flim-flam artists. They've had thousands of years to get these cons together and run them on you. Believe me, I know. I'm a recovering Catholic. You have to fight your way free of belief, and then do not follow. Do not follow. It's an obsolete, tasteless thing, and there's no human dignity in it whatsoever. Then a harder one, a more radical one, the one that might get me shot. Do not, in some profoundly metaphysical sense, consume. Do not consume. For obvious reasons, and then not so obvious reasons. The obvious reasons are that the fetish for objects made of matter is wrecking the planet. If everybody on Earth had what the people in the front row here have, there wouldn't be enough metal, glass, plastic, and petroleum in the planet to provide that kind of lifestyle to the billions of people who now aspire it. None of this stuff brings happiness anyway. I recently had the experience of having my 75 Ford Granada blow up on me in the middle of the night. And so I had to buy a new car. So I went down a year and up a brand, and I got a 74 BMW. And it cost me $2,000. And I guarantee you, once you have the little thing on the steering wheel, the quaternity sign, you don't need the $90,000 model. What we should all do is buy antiques. Don't consume anything which hasn't already been made. It's a lot of shit that's been made. It's all over the place. I see it in Manhattan going for a bundle. What we need to do, you see, is retool our values so that what is new is odious, tasteless, déclassé, embarrassing, and not to be found in the better home.